Well, good afternoon. Um, we're all, shelter at home. So, was chatting last night with a good friend of mine, Greg Dotter, and decided that I needed a creative outlet. Well, it's the UPS truck down the street. So, what I've come up with is a guy in a garage talking about a movie. Now, here's the idea. The idea is simple. I'm not a movie critic. Don't pretend to be a movie critic. I'm not going to be a movie critic. What I am going to do is I am going to talk about a movie that I like and why I like it and give a little background on it. And today I picked one that predates me, coming up on its 50th anniversary, by the way. Wait for that diesel to move by. Now, you may have been able to pick it up on the screen right here. By the way, feedback on the set. What do you think? Huh? Living up to the guy in the garage. By the way, my car right over there, right behind the computer. So I decided I'm going to talk about a movie that I like. And I'm going to keep doing a couple of these and kind of get some feedback and maybe have you suggest something that I may not have seen that we can talk about or that I can talk about. So here goes. So basically, the gist of this is going to be, and I've taken some notes, is that just a regular guy talking about a movie. Like I said, not a critic. I've taken a grand total of, I think, 2 film classes. Again, not a student, not a critic, not a filmmaker. I mean, I made some, amateur movie stuff in high school with some friends, and worked at a campus-based TV station where I did some things my first time at college, but I'm not a filmmaker per se. Um, so I'm going to go through these movies. My kind of a gist of it is how I was introduced to the film, why I like it, general terms. I'm not going to get into, well, the filmmaker, he framed this scene so well because you can see all this act. I'm not going to do that stuff because really, as a regular film viewer, you're not going to care about that either. Neither do I. The film school flunkouts who become critics, they're going to care about that. The rest of us probably don't. I mean, some of us do. I'm not judging. But, that's not where I want to go with this. So instead, the gist of it is, again, how I was introduced to the film, why I like it, and dive into some things like specifics about the director, stuff about the cast, setting, maybe some backstories as well. The one I've chosen today is, of course, as you could probably tell, Kelly's Heroes came out in June of 1970. Like I said, predated me by a little more than a month. Oops. And the screen blacked out. Okay, we're going to get to that in a second. So this was a film that had a pretty robust cast. Obviously, you can see from the screen here, Clint Eastwood, Don Rickles, 2 of the big names. Also adding to the mix, Donald Sutherland, Carroll O'Connor, Telly Savalas. And then you've got a pretty robust cast of character actors in there, such as, Telly Savalas' younger brother plays a small role as Sergeant Mulligan, which, of course, the name is, intended to be a little bit of a joke. So, plus you got other people like Stuart Margolis in the movie, who came to be better known for his role as Angel in the Rockford Files, but several others. Harry Dean Stanton, who's credited in this, coincidentally, as only Dean Stanton. So they all make their presence known because, well, that's what they're hired to do as actors. Stars are stars, and character actors are the characters. And again, you'll see some other characters as well. In fact, for those who are fans of another movie, will recognize near the end when the German tank commander appears, Carl Otto Abernathy also appeared in The Great Escape as the one who caught Richard Attenborough's character at the end. So anyhow, quick little clip here before I go into more stories. This is where the character of Kraft Game was first person introduced. Backstory in this movie, before I go into the characters, Clint Eastwood plays a private who was formerly a lieutenant. He got blamed for basically his whole company getting, slaughtered in a badly organized attack during the Second World War. So he's busted out to private, but still has obviously some leadership ambitions. And when this situation arose where he learned that there is a bank full of gold, there's a lot of banks full of gold. This one happens to be in enemy hands, 30 miles behind enemy lines. And he decides, hey, maybe we can go after this and no one will be any the wiser. So here's where it begins, where he meets with Don Rickles' character, Sergeant Kraft Game, a supply sergeant.
What do you want? I want to talk to you for a couple minutes. What about? I have this deal I've been working on. I think you might be interested in helping me out. What kind of deal? Private deal. Oh, yeah? Hey, Harry, go get yourself a haircut.
Let me pause it right there. Go get yourself a haircut. Here we are. Something many of us would love to do right now is go get a haircut. Manicure, pedicure, all those personal things. Funny he likes to mention that. Well, it's not funny. It's written in the script, but it is timely.
I hear Maitland's got himself a yacht and taking it to Paris. Right. Don't want any yachts. What do you want a yacht for? Who cares, as long as it keeps him out of our hair for a few days. Okay, Kelly. What is it? What is it you want? Well, I want 15 Thompsons, 230 caliber machine guns, 2 bazookas, 2 field radios, and enough supplies and ammunition to last a platoon of men in the field for 3 days. Oh, that all? Nope.
So let's point out something here. I'm not a military person, but here's a former lieutenant, now a private because he got busted down, who has the audacity to go to supply sergeant and ask for all this stuff. Happens to be nice that the supply sergeant is, shall we say, a corruptible type, and he's going to go along with it.
I want the intelligence report for this whole sector, and I need them in the next 2 hours. That's nice. What's in it for me? At least the action? What kind of action? This kind of action.
So now you see how the story gets started. Now earlier on, for those who've not seen the movie, Kelly happens to capture a Oberst or colonel in the Wehrmacht, the German army, and discovers through a little interrogation with a little assistance of a little something a lot of us are partaking in these days, gets that location of the gold and how much is there. So, of course, the wheels get spinning. He needs to get some people involved to make this happen. And it's a story of, well, a bank robbery, logistics, and, some wartime action. Now, mind you, when you think this is a traditional war movie, it's not. Give you some backstory to this. So Clint Eastwood, prior to this movie, worked on a film with Richard Burton called Where Eagles Dare. The director of that was a gentleman named Brian G. Hutton. There were some issues in that film, but Hutton and the screenwriters made a go of it and basically worked out the chemistry between Eastwood and Burton pretty well. So this movie comes up, and it's set to be directed by a gentleman named Don Siegel, who happens to be a favorite director of Clint Eastwood. Now, he directed a lot of the Dirty Harry series, but in this case, he signed up to do this movie, which at the time was called, I believe, The Warriors, before it got through its renaming process. And he was stuck in post-production working on a film called Two Mules for Sister Sarah, also pretty well respected in the film community. Now, of course, When Siegel's not able to do the film, they need to find somebody else. And of course, they figure, well, Eastwood already worked with Brian G. Hutton. Let's bring Brian G. Hutton in. Eastwood can't back out. Eastwood said following this movie, after seeing what MGM did to it, mind you, those of you who think highly of MGM Studios, yeah, historically they were very good. But at this point, 1969, 1970, they'd just been bought out by an investor named Kirk Kerkorian. Kerkorian was sort of a 1960s, early 70s corporate raider who decided to decimate the studio. So they were hurting financially because of all the penny pinching that was going on. So they wanted to make a go with this. So Eastwood, under contract, has to do the film. Brian G. Hutton, well, he's worked with Eastwood, so he's going to do the film, and they're going to make a go of it. So that's kind of part of the backstory. Now, some other things that happened is they brought in other people, like, of course, Don Rickles, who many of you may not know was a very professionally trained actor. To pay the bills, he decided to get into stand-up comedy. But he was an actor first. Lucky for those of us who are fans of comedy, he, well, made an impact in that industry. But of course, in this role, he's a nice fit, because what Hutton did with the story was he took a story that was based upon that little drop of truth, something that actually happened, and with screenwriter Troy Kennedy Martin, they expanded on the story and turned it into this film. Yeah, by the way, those of you who didn't know, there's an ounce of truth to this film. So, with all of that, coming out of this film, Eastwood said he would never do a movie without having some kind of creative control again in the future. And he pretty much stuck to his word on that. And to this day, you'll notice a lot of his work is directed by. And if he's not in front of the camera, he's at least producing and directing. So the story goes on with not only the antics of Private Kelly, who later brings on other folks like Telly Savalas' character, Big Joe, who come into the mix and help lead this platoon. And then one of the most popular, most memed characters of modern age, and I've referenced him also, is of course the guy driving that thing.
Joe's pretty clear over here, except for the artillery.
And that's Donald Sutherland's character, named Oddball. Now, one of the things I'll tell you about Oddball is, much like Sutherland's character in the movie MASH, his character is pretty much a take on what was actually happening during the filming of both films, which was the Vietnam War. Kind of an anti-war type guy. But one of the things that you often hear Oddball say is, knock it off with those negative waves. I share that because right now, a lot of us are dealing with those negative waves. So, this is a good escape to focus on less negative, maybe a little more positive. Now, this movie I was introduced to by my father. Give you a little backstory on me. Growing up, didn't have access to cable television. Once we left Kansas City, we lived in a small town, East Troy, Wisconsin, which with the motorized rotor on our antenna allowed us to pick up stations from both Milwaukee and Chicago, and in good weather days, occasionally Madison and Rockford, Illinois. But usually that meant movies were limited to whatever was broadcast on TV. And the few new movies that came out that Mom would take us to. Dad wasn't a big movie guy. In fact, he had a bad experience in a movie theater and refused to go back until my mom got sick, and he decided to take us, because Mom was sick and she had promised, he took us to Empire Strikes Back. And he had no clue what was going on because, again, we didn't have access to, well, Star Wars, as you may recall, didn't get released on cable or pay-per-view until 1983. So how would he have seen it if he had never been to the movie theater? Anyhow, this is one of my dad's favorite movies. And one of those is because he liked Clint Eastwood. Liked him on Rawhide, liked him in the spaghetti westerns that he had done. And of course, he was a big fan of Don Rickles. The other actors, maybe not his biggest draw, but he liked those two, and that was what brought him into the movie. What he also liked, as he explained to me, was it was a movie with action, but also with a lot of humor. Not like in your face airplane style humor, but with humor to it. Now, of course, because of my lack of access to various types of cable television or anything else, I didn't see this film until I was probably 15 or 16 years old, when I was able to go to the local movie rental place, which was not Blockbuster. This was a small town. I can't remember the name of the movie rental place, but I probably paid $5 in 1985, 1986 to rent this. Took it home, watched it, was like, I get it. I get why he likes it. And that was how I got interested in it. Now, what I like about it is, again, the broadcast of not only the big names, but also in the character actors. Namely, I mentioned before, Stuart Margolin and Harry Dean Stanton, but also I think his name is Len Lasser, who became known in the 90s as playing the uncle to Jerry Seinfeld on the series Seinfeld. So a pretty deep cast of both lead actors and character actors made it compelling. The level of action, the attention to certain details was kind of interesting to pay attention to. They filmed this in Yugoslavia. Now the area would be Croatia, but back then it was Yugoslavia. It was picked for two big reasons. The first reason was MGM needed to save money. And one of the laws when producing movies in Yugoslavia was how much you could take out of the country. You had to leave so much of the money in country. So they were able to produce this with money they already had sitting in Yugoslav coffers to go ahead and make that. The second piece was they could get some surplus from the Yugoslav army, because they had things that could be made to look like, or were actually the same as what you would find in World War II U.S. Army or the German Army. Now, late in the film, when you see the Tiger tanks, they're actually Russian T-34s. They could modify them to look like a Tiger tank. Or really in 1970, the detail, not as important, so people probably weren't paying that close attention to that stuff. I know I never did. Same thing with having access to the Shermans. They had access to the Sherman tanks because the Yugoslav army had them in surplus, and they could purchase them with, again, that pool of money they had sitting in Yugoslavia. Now, interesting side stories. There was supposed to be a female lead. Forgot who. I think it was Ingrid Pitt supposed to play it, but I'm not 100% sure. But it was somebody who was in Where Eagles Dare, the film that I mentioned earlier, where Brian G. Hutton directed and Clint Eastwood co-starred with Richard Burton. Before she was to board the plane for Yugoslavia, they said, "Nah, your part's been canceled." And she didn't get on the flight. But think about it. World War II, late 1944. Where do you insert a female lead into a war movie? Unless you put in the ever popular hospital scenes where you can throw a nurse in, or you throw in, like wax and waves. I don't know. I just don't see how you could do it. So again, it's also that does make it a very male-oriented film. Now, other things that are worth noting, Donald Sutherland got very sick while shooting this film. And his then wife was called and said, you might want to hurry over here. But somewhere in between, she also got herself in a little bit of trouble. I can't remember her name. She just recently, Shirley Douglas. She just passed away recently. Shirley Douglas got herself in a little trouble before this film was completed. In fact, Clint Eastwood had to tell Donald Sutherland what happened, which was Shirley Douglas was a bit of an activist. She was caught, later charges were dropped, but she was caught trying to buy hand grenades for the Black Panthers. This was filmed in '69. Helps set the tone. By the way, Shirley Douglas, Kiefer Sutherland's mom. Throwing it out there. So again, this is one of those films that, like I said, I probably saw for the first time when I was able to finally rent it. But again, just a film that I truly, truly have enjoyed. And honestly, it was one of the first films that I actually bought on my VHS collection when I had VHS tapes. Back in 1992, when I moved out to Las Vegas for the first time, every so often, needed something to perk me back up from being in a bad mood. You know, what did I lean on? This. So anyhow, love to hear your feedback. This is my foray into a guy in a garage talking about a movie. Thank you for watching. Next time, it'll be another one that I came to like that also predates my life. Anyhow, once again, thank y'all for watching. I hope y'all are doing as well as can be expected in this very, very challenging time. And I'll just play a little bit more of the film before I go away. At this point, they're in what's supposed to be Claremont, trying to get down towards the bank. Again, the film is Kelly's Heroes, 1970, starring Clint Eastwood, Donald Sutherland, Telly Savalas, Don Rickles, Carol O'Connor, cast of many character actors, directed by Brian G. Hutton, and released by MGM. Take care, stay safe.